Why is it that women are the ones migrating to find livelihood overseas? The Philippines' feudal and patriarchal culture molds women to be caretakers and mothers who are expected to sacrifice, find ways to provide food on the table for the children, and sacrifice themselves for others. This gender oppression pushes Filipino women to migrate and endure dehumanizing working conditions abroad. Under globalization, the export of labor and trafficking of women are prime resources for profit. Women as commodities are profitable for the Philippine government. President Gloria Arroyo calls us the Philippines' modern-day heroes because our dollar remittances are the lifeline of the Philippine economy. In 2008, the Philippine Central Bank recorded 16.4 billion US dollars in remittances. 52% of these come from the US, mostly from women domestic workers. The Philippines is so dependent on remittances that if we, Filipino domestic workers, would stop sending money, in just 4 days, the Philippine economy would collapse. It is clear that both sending and receiving countries benefit from the labor of migrant domestic workers, while they neglect our basic labor and human rights. What is often not clear is that we, women, our children, and our families are paying the cost of migration. Dollar remittances alleviate our families' poverty, but these dollars do not impact the structural and systemic poverty of the whole society. The absence of women as a social fabric results in children becoming delinquents, drug addicts, and some become teen mothers. Marital relationships are also negatively impacted. This is another dimension of women's oppression and why many domestic workers suffer from severe emotional, mental, and psychological problems. Domestic workers are at the front line of the economic crisis on two ends, in our homeland and here in the US. Our wages are depressed locally, our hours are cut, and our benefits are scaled down despite heavier workload. Amid the global recession, New York City continues to be the center of the world economy, but it cannot be without the labor of women domestic workers. We perform the necessary labor to make other work possible for American businesses and professionals. We do the very basic and vital work for any economy, taking care of the next generation, the elderly, the homes, cooking food, and doing the laundry. But even in New York, our labor remains unrecognized, unprotected, and devalued. I have briefly provided an overview of the global conditions that create the abuse and exploitation of women domestic workers. But these same conditions have provided an opportunity for DAMAYAN, together with sister organizations under the National Domestic Workers Alliance. Sisters from Domestic Workers United and Andolan share our collective work educating, organizing, and mobilizing our communities to build a movement. From our homelands to the U.S., the grassroots to the national and international, domestic workers are continuing to realize our power. We are fighting for our rights, respect, dignity, and liberation, and through this, we aim to give real value to our work as women. Thank you.
So we've heard from both Barbara and Linda a bit about what the experience is like for domestic workers, for most domestic workers in the United States, and for Linda specifically also about the experience and the different things that bring migrant domestic workers to the United States. Next we'll hear from Ivy Suriyopas a little bit more about the particular experiences of some migrant domestic workers. Ivy is a staff attorney with the Anti-Trafficking Initiative at the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. The Anti-Trafficking Initiative addresses the intersection of immigration, race, class, age, and sex while adding to ALDEF's comprehensive approach to serving the Asian American community. She provides legal representation conducts community education and outreach, and engages in policy advocacy on sex and labor trafficking issues.
Good evening, everyone. It's hard to follow Linda. I am a staff attorney, and I represent trafficking survivors and workers who have employment claims, wage and hour claims, against their former employers. And I definitely see a connect, a link between what we see in terms of economic exploitation and what we ultimately see in trafficking cases, which is the most severe form of exploitation imaginable in the workplace environment. In terms of my representation, I assist workers in their applications for immigration relief if they want to stay in the U.S. Or if they want to repatriate to their countries of origin through the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act, a federal law. In addition to that, I also assist workers if they want to bring the perpetrators to court in a civil suit in order to recover monetary damages. So if they want to recover the unpaid wages for a few months' work or several years' work, I assist them with that. That is also under the TVPRA, as well as the Fair Labor Standards Act and any other claims that exist at the federal and state level. Unfortunately, in terms of this representation and assisting these workers, it's almost too little too late because these are all remedies to address problems that could have been prevented, ideally, if there was more monitoring and regulating of domestic work, the domestic worker industry in the first place. We saw in the film how there are a number of laws that exclude domestic workers and from the protections of the various laws that exist both at the federal and state level. And agencies that exist, such as the Department of Labor or other agencies that seek to protect workers, are not available or are not allowed to under the law to make sure that the laws are being followed in these private homes. And it's that inherent tension that exists between our rights to privacy and also the protection of workers in a household or any place where they are exchanging labor and services for money. In terms of the workers that I represent, they come from a wide range of industries. The majority of my cases do involve domestic workers. I also represent restaurant workers, garment factory workers, and those in the entertainment industry. But in terms of the domestic workers, I don't think of it as a coincidence that the vast majority of my clients do tend to be from that industry because of all of the different vulnerabilities that were described in the film. Obviously, most of them are majority people of color. Oftentimes they're immigrant. Oftentimes they're monolingual. They are working in private homes where they don't have coworkers. They don't have peers with whom to organize. They don't have peers with whom to share or learn about the different laws that exist to protect them. And if they are working in a household, it's harder for them to seek any kind of assistance if they're live-in. If they are in a suburban area or region, where are they going to go? That limits them even more so.